Borderline personality disorder, or known as BPD, as well as attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, more commonly known as ADHD, are two conditions that can lead to difficulty in daily life. And while they may share some overlapping symptoms, they are fundamentally different. So if you're curious to know the difference and the similarities between those two mental disorders, be sure to stick around. Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hello, my name is Kayla and I'm a registered psychotherapist who releases new videos every Monday about all things BPD and mental health. So if that sounds good to you, be sure to hit the subscribe button down below as well as the bell notification up top. Important to note that these videos are for educational purposes only and are not a substitute for real professional psychotherapy. So let's get into today's topic. We will be discussing ADHD versus BPD. I know, and I hear this often, that folks with BPD tend to get misdiagnosed or also diagnosed with ADHD. And so I think it's important to understand what the similarities are, what the differences are, and what to do if you have both of these disorders for treatment. Now, when it comes to similarities between these two disorders, the main thing that we can see in common is impulsivity. Impulsivity can make it really difficult for both parties, both ADHD and BPD, to manage and regulate emotions, and in turn making it difficult to maintain interpersonal relationships. And while on a surface level, this impulsivity may seem similar, it's actually really different. So for folks who have BPD, impulsivity is usually triggered by high stress situations, meaning that they're responding to the environment and in turn acting impulsively. While folks with ADHD, their impulsivity is motor impulsivity, meaning that they have this internal need to act spur of the moment, which may look like speaking impulsively, doing things impulsively. It's not necessarily triggered by stress. It's more of the function of how they are as individuals. Where we see BPD, it's really triggered for the most part by these high stress external situations. And yes, while this impulsivity may be caused by different things, fundamentally though, what we do see is that this does lead to difficulty regulating emotions. And so if we can imagine that being under high stress circumstances, which leads to impulsivity, but also difficulty managing emotions because we're so overwhelmed that we don't necessarily know how to respond to the situation. Folks with ADHD, we can see this similarly, that this impulsive nature makes it so that it's difficult to regulate their internal processes, whether that's emotions, speech, actions. It's this need to act without thinking. So again, I want to stress the distinction between the two. BPD is really this lack of capacity to act appropriately when in high stress situations, versus ADHD, it's really this lack of thinking before acting. While these two disorders are different, they obviously do share some overlapping similarities, and so this is one of the reasons why we do often see ADHD as being a comorbid disorder for BPD. We also need to realize that ADHD, based on all the research that has been done, which I will just link in the show notes down below, but essentially research has demonstrated that ADHD lends to the biological vulnerabilities that can potentially lead to BPD, meaning that if you have ADHD, you might be more biologically prone to be more sensitive, impulsive, to have some of these qualities that make it so that BPD would develop naturally with this, given your interpersonal environment and your own life experiences. So it's not uncommon. We also need to be mindful that the way that ADHD presents itself in different individuals is highly different. And so, especially when thinking about women who struggle with ADHD, sometimes we see this more as ADD, so without the hyperactivity component, and it's more this difficulty with managing emotions, the impulse control issues, difficulty with interpersonal relationships because of those different things, which to me makes sense that then there's comorbid resemblances with BPD or overlap. Now the question becomes, what do we do if we have both ADHD and BPD? I think one of the first things would be to speak to a medical professional, whether that's a psychiatrist, your family doctor, psychologist, whatever that looks like, to get the proper diagnosis. You want to make sure that you are getting treated for the specific things that you have, because, for example, if you get misdiagnosed with ADHD when you actually just have BPD and they give you stimulant medication, that might not be the best approach. If you do end up having both, I think that a combination of stimulants to deal with the ADHD component of it and potentially mood stabilizers or antidepressants for the BPD component of it might be a good solution. However, you need to once again speak to your own professional medical supervisor to make sure that you're getting the appropriate medication that you need for your case. I want to also highlight the fact that with BPD specifically, hasn't really been any medications that have been shown to improve the symptoms significantly. And so when dealing with this, it is important to speak with someone who is trained and aware for the needs and niches of both disorders. So medication might be one piece of the puzzle if you do have both ADHD and BPD. Another piece would be psychotherapy. So whether that's dialectical behavior therapy, DBT, which is really catered and specific to individuals who do have BPD. And I tell this to everyone, I think that everyone could benefit from going through a program of DBT. They're general life skills that are really handy to know. And so that might be a good solution. Family therapy, also depending on your age. If you do have ADHD, it's important to get your family involved so that they know how to better support and cater to your needs. And of course, some of the classic things that I always talk about: self-compassion, mindfulness skills, self-care. So really focusing on giving ourselves this capacity to forgive ourselves in times of difficulty so that we're not adding shame to our experiences, because dealing with disorders, mental health disorders alone, it's already difficult enough. And so when we're adding shame and stigma and all those other things on top of it, it makes the experience so much worse. So there you have it. That was just a quick overview about the main differences and similarities that we do see between ADHD and BPD. I'm mindful that this video was not in that much detail. And so if you are curious about ADHD specifically, and would like me to do a video that describes this disorder in more detail and ways that you can help yourself if you do struggle with this, let me know in the comments down below. On that note, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with me today. I wish you all an amazing week, and I will see you next time for another episode of On the Line.